I'm Paul Nagy. I'm at Johns Hopkins. I have the real pleasure of co-leading the open source community working group with the one and only Adam Black. And we had a lot of fun putting together the workshop on Friday, and we were really thrilled to see many of you there. We basically wanted to make it a demystifying session. We wanted to have a lot of our great open source projects. We have a lot of them, but we wanted to bring a sampling of them, and we wanted them to help demystify the process for how software gets made, how people can contribute, and really try to roll out the welcome mat to encourage new contributors into our community. We are an open science community, and we are an open source community, and how we create the software matters. And so this has really been an exciting way for helping new people learn in the process. And so we put this day together, and I was in track 1 with Atlas, WebAPI, White Rabbit, and Data Quality Dashboard, and Adam was in track 2. In track 1, it was a lot of fun. We got some incredible live demos. We had some really powerful code reviews. I saw a lot of healthy competition between my projects around recruiting why they think developers should start with them. And so I thought that was really great to see which project. Claire made a great case for why Data Quality Dashboards is a great place to get started as a developer, and how they showed different areas that they could use help, and some of the things that they could help people learn as part of their project. But I did hear a lot of noise from the other room from track 2. So Adam, what was going on? Were you guys having a party over there?
Yeah, Paul, we were definitely having a party. And we had Jamie Gilbert talking about cohort diagnostics, Jenna looking at patient prediction, and Mark talking about Cyclops. And so I learned a lot from these presentations, and I'm definitely going to review them, and looking forward to also watch the track 1 presentations. Particularly all the C++ stuff that Mark went through is all very new to me and really interesting.
Yeah, I was really interested with the JavaScript. So it was a great morning. We saw a lot of engagement. And then what we're going to do is we're going to give a little preview of what we did for the State of the Union, the State of the OHDSI. Martijn's going to give a piece of his keynote, and then Lee's going to come and talk a little bit about the great panel discussion we had about how do we put all these pieces together and deploy them in enterprise IT environments. And so here, our goal was really to try to create a unified developer experience for new developers in OHDSI. So we had a lot of the projects talked about their history and the people behind the project, behind the code. We did a lot. For the Atlas, it was a great code review. We went through all the JavaScript and the different layers around it. We showed how the documentation was created. We talked about some of the integration testing and the release process. And I thought it was a great discussion about how the maintainers were really just trying to make people understand ways that they can get involved. We had a lot of discussion around different training tools people could use to get up to speed with Knockout for Atlas and for Java with WebAPI. But it was a great discussion. And so we had 192 registrations. Only over half had experience with GitHub, which is the main project management tool for how we go through open source code development. We had a lot of projects of interest with Atlas and Hades and WebAPI leading the pack. And we had a lot of diversity in our preferred programming languages. And I think the other was mostly SQL. If from the comments that I got from folks, I suspect the other had a lot to do with SQL or some T-SQL variants of that. But it was great to see the diversity of the community that came out on Friday. Okay, and so Adam, if you want to give a little bit about some of the work that we've been doing to try to look at the overall stats of the community of all the repos in the OHDSI organization.
Sure. So this will be kind of repeat for some people who are in the DevCon. When we're talking about OHDSI open source software, we're largely talking about the repositories in 2 GitHub organizations, the OHDSI GitHub organization and OHDSI Studies. However, there's still a lot of other open source software that runs on the OMOP CDM outside of this. But these are where the easiest projects to discover are. What John and what Paul Nagy and his team at Johns Hopkins have done is scraped a large amount of data from GitHub that we can use to understand our software ecosystem, and we put it into this platform that's Bitergia dashboard. And so I've been looking at some of this data along with Paul. Under the OHDSI GitHub organization, we have 208 repositories currently, and these span a wide variety of different types of projects. Everything from production software to proof of concepts, documentation, ETL code, vocabulary data, and workgroup files. An idea that we want to introduce to the community is an idea of a software lifecycle for OHDSI software, and something that we can work on in the open source community work group over the next several months is just defining what that lifecycle looks like and kind of clearly communicating where different projects are in that lifecycle. In order to kind of measure OHDSI software, we wanted to come up with a definition of OHDSI core software. And there's many different ways you could think about defining a core set of OHDSI software. We were thinking about what projects would be part of the standard OHDSI distribution. If we had like a standard distribution, what would be part of it? The projects really need to be actively used and maintained and need to have a high degree of maturity in terms of documentation and release management. We're thinking of these as like the base projects that you really need in order to get value from your CDM. It's by no means a final or comprehensive list, and if you have thoughts on this topic, we'd love to hear from you in the open source community work group. But now that we have some set of software that we're trying to kind of understand and look at, we can look at the growth of the software. So we can see that the number of authors, the number of people contributing to the software has been increasing steadily over since the beginning of the OHDSI GitHub organization in 2014. And we're measuring growth also in terms of pull requests. So a pull request is essentially a unit of change that gets added to the software, and it's kind of a proxy for progress in the software, but it's a quantitative measure that we can use to kind of measure how much activity is going on in this in a particular project. So we can see a lot of growth over our history in terms of pull requests. In some of the reason for the lower numbers in the past couple of years have been that Atlas had a large push in 2018 and 2019. So there was a lot of activity on Atlas and WebAPI there. And outside of that, in Hades and other projects, we're still seeing a lot of growth. Another area that we want to pay attention to is sustainability. And when we're thinking about an ecosystem, a good measure of this is diversity. And so we've seen already that we've got a diverse number of individuals contributing, so having more different individuals contributing, as well as organizations that are supporting those individuals. So one way that an organization can support OHDSI is by supporting individuals who work in OHDSI, whether it's software development or something else. But having different organizations supporting particular maintainers of OHDSI software leads to a healthy ecosystem. We can borrow from ecology and come up with a quantitative metric. So this is, I'm just learning about some of the metrics that are used in ecology. And so this Shannon Diversity Index is one, and it's kind of a measure of diversity. So you can see that over time, this index for individuals has been increasing slowly. And in the organizations, it's been pretty constant and a little bit lower in the last year. On the third column, it's if you exponentiate this number, you kind of get a number you can think of as the effective number of individual contributors or the effective number of organizational contributors. So this is something that we kind of want to pay attention to and think about. And third, we want to have a way to identify bottlenecks. Where are things kind of getting stopped, and where are the points in the process of software contribution that might need more attention? So if someone opens a pull request and it doesn't receive attention for a long time, that's a potential bottleneck that we want to highlight and pay attention to. And so what we have in the dashboard is a metric called time to first attention. So this is the time between the number of days between when the pull request is opened and when someone starts commenting on it. So here's the time to first attention distribution for Atlas and WebAPI. We want to pay attention to both the median as well as the higher end of the distribution. So sometimes there are pull requests that take a long time to get attention, and we want to be clued into those. Here's a similar table for just the Hades repositories, and we can see that even with increasing number of repositories and increasing number of authors and increasing number of pull requests, we have a really good time to first attention of less than a day for median, and on the high end it's around 40 days. One of the things that we do in Hades to help us manage this is we've got this nice dashboard that clearly defines who the maintainer is of each project, as well as the number of open issues and pull requests. There's also documentation on the developer guidelines and how to get involved, and code style and things like just developer documentation for people who want to make contributions. So in summary, what we've been working on in the open source community work group is defining the set of OHDSI core software, measuring growth, sustainability, and bottlenecks. We want to support new maintainers from a wide variety of organizations. So again, this is one way that organizations can contribute to OHDSI, and our work group provides kind of the infrastructure for that, and the Chiron contributor cohort that Paul's going to introduce is a great way to get started on that track. And we want to define the OHDSI way of open source software development. So what are kind of the best practices that we use in OHDSI to develop software and grow our community? So that's what I have. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. And really, the OHDSI way should be built upon the values and principles of OHDSI. We like to do things in a reproducible way and in a sustainable way. So we had a great time on Friday. It was really very exciting. We wanted to continue the party. And so we are now introducing a new program called the 2022 Chiron Contributor Cohort. And so what we hope to do now is actually onboard a new group of contributors across the diverse array of OHDSI projects as a group. And so you'll see Craig already mentioned the link to the interest form. I want to give a little bit more details around that, what we're trying to do. So if you're interested in career development and getting training opportunities within the cohort from technical leaders in professional software development or mentoring from the OHDSI community, we see that this is really going to be an exciting activity. We hope to create a global perspective of our ecosystem. We've got many technologies, many projects, and we want to build more cross connections across our projects. And we want a team environment where we can be working on documentation, testing, and process improvement, as well as development. We feel like by doing this, we're going to be creating future leaders for OHDSI and helping create an OHDSI way. And so who is this for? This is actually we're looking for software developers across the spectrum. You might be new to software development, and we're going to be giving you mentoring tutorials on how to be working in development, as well as being a seasoned expert. We're going to be talking about global policies for how do we create the OHDSI way for our code of conducts, our licensing, our software release management. And so there's also plenty of non-development roles in open source, from project management, technical writing, and communication. So we want this to be open. We were looking for new contributors. We're offering to mentor you for the year and have this ongoing activities. What we'll have is every 2 weeks, we have a 1-hour phone call on Teams, and we bring in different technical leaders we talk about different best practices in software development. And we will host and participate in documentathons, hackathons, and testathons. And we are interested in creating recommended learning tracks. So a part of your time will be recommending ways of learning. There's lots of online learning tools now for software development, from Git Learning Labs whether it's project-specific training in technology like Knockout for Atlas or R for Hades, or very technology-specific training too within the projects themselves. There's whole slews of different roles that we'll help find for you within our OHDSI ecosystem. So, and I think a part of this, a fun discussion that we're going to be having over the next year is how do we create this OHDSI way? What are the best practices for robust software development across OHDSI to enable our mission of reproducible research? And so this means how we look at our software licensing, our code of conduct, our coordination of release cycles. A lot of this gets into testing and how do we automate testing so that as you submit code, it already goes through testing environments, and so that you get immediate feedback. And we're also going to be having architectural discussions of OHDSI to maintain innovation as we move forward. So this is, even if you're a seasoned software developer, this is where we're going to be having a lot of great discussions on the future of our OHDSI system and how do we maintain innovation within our group. And we're going to be bringing in and learning from other open source ecosystems like the Apache and Eclipse and NumFocus, where we really can learn from very large scale systems, but we feel like we've got a great base within our own community. So what are we asking for? We're offering to provide you this mentoring. And so what is the mentee commitment? So we're asking for you to make a commitment for 4 hours a week or 10% of your time for a year. And this should fit within your learning and growth activities for many companies. Most of this will be self-paced, where we're only going to have a couple of activities per month, and we'll give you the rest for learning or activities to be involved with. And we're going to be choosing our first cohort next month. And so now's the time we'd like you to apply and consider a way of being involved within our OHDSI community. This is something that's going to look great on your resume. It's going to give you professional software development experience, as well as being deeply embedded to see how OHDSI creates the software that we use on a daily basis. Great. And so here's, as Craig mentioned, here's the link. Just go to our DevCon 22 page, and you'll see the link to click here to apply for our Chiron contributor cohort. All right, Adam, back to you. Oh, do you want to, Martijn, do you want to give a quick overview of your keynote address?
Yes, Paul, sure. I put together a summary of my slides. So let's go look at those while I give a summary of my talk. So I recommend, of course, seeing the full keynote, but just to remind everybody what I did talk about. So one of the things I think is unique about OHDSI compared to other open source communities is if you look at a community like Apache, which is very well known and very well respected, their slogan is community over code, which I definitely don't disagree with. I do think both community and code are very important. But certainly in the past couple of years, certainly the first couple of years of OHDSI, I think our slogan has been science. And so science has been very instrumental in OHDSI and in how we approach our open source software. If you look at where our open source software lives, I would say it's at the core of OHDSI. So on the one hand, we do our methods research, where we try to establish best practices by doing empirical research. And then we have our open source software, such as Hades or Atlas, where we then implement these best practices. And only after implementing them can we use them to do further science, which I will call clinical research, where we actually apply the best practices through our open source tools to generate evidence about health and healthcare. It can be used to improve healthcare and hopefully make the world a better place. And so really the open source software is the thing that enables all of this. And I think it's important that software is open source to allow for transparency and reproducibility. And the reproducibility is something you really need if you want to be able to critically evaluate your methods. So feeding back into that methods research. And so viewed from a lens of science, I would say our open source software has already been tremendously successful. Just what I could count myself, I could count 21 methods research papers that use the Hades software, which is the one that I'm mostly involved in. One of my favorite ones is the bottom left one, where we did a very large scale benchmarking of all different estimation methods. We also have at least 25, but certainly many more clinical research papers that use HDSi. I don't have a good count of these, but there are 25 that I'm aware of. One of the ones that I'd like to highlight is the one on the bottom right, which is our paper in the Lancet, where we compared basically all antihypertensive treatments for a large set of effectiveness and safety outcomes. Some of our work, especially on COVID and COVID-related outcomes, has actually already impacted decisions by the EMA and probably also by the FDA, although we don't know that last one for sure. So from that perspective, I think we've been very successful, and I think actually the best is yet ahead. Craig already briefly mentioned that next week's community call is going to be about the Darwin project. So the EMA has identified the Erasmus Medical Center as the coordinating center for Darwin. And the idea is that Darwin will run on the OHDSI's principles and software, generating evidence for the EU and hopefully also outside of the EU. So how did we achieve this success? Well, how did HDSi grow over time? So we started with scientists basically laying the foundation of this, but we also very quickly welcomed developers in addition to the scientists. We defined some standards and interfaces, and the biggest standard is the one that we started with, is the common data model. But we also defined standards for how to release our packages, how to do the versioning. As Adam already alluded to, we have things like code style guidelines and other documentation aimed at the developers. We have open meetings and open discussions. We meet every third Thursday of the month. And so if you want to join, everybody certainly is welcome to join these meetings. Last year, we had a unit testathon, which is basically a hackathon where we developed unit tests. And that was, I think, a great success. And we're hoping to have a hackathon also attached to the OHDSI Symposium in Bethesda later this year. Now we're up to 12 different HDSI maintainers. So these are maintainers that actually maintain these HDSI packages. So I think that's a very good development that we have so many different developers. So we've grown a lot. So where do we go from here? Maybe not surprisingly, I'd say we still need to grow the community further. So that should be one of our main objectives. We need more users. We need more contributors. We need more developers, maintainers, and even leaders of our open source community. But one thing I'd like to emphasize is that while we grow the community, I think it's very important to keep the science at the core of our software. So how do we grow the community? Just throwing some ideas out there. We need to provide on-ramps. We need to allow people to become users and users to become contributors and contributors to become developers. And so the very first step in that road, that journey, is to make it easier for users to actually start using our software. And so that means that it should be easier to install our software. If you currently try to install HDSI, for example, that actually is quite a lengthy process. And so one of the things that Lee Evans actually pointed out is that his broad C environment might actually be a good step to very quickly get people up and running with our tools. So that's something that we will definitely be exploring in this year. We're also trying to make it so that even those that don't necessarily know how to write R code will be able to use our R packages. So basically through a point and click interface, design your study, run it, view the results, and don't have to write any R code. We also need to provide development opportunities for our users and especially for developers. So as I mentioned earlier, we have both scientists and software developers working together to develop this code. And I would argue we need to pull these two groups a little bit closer together, for example, by allowing developers to run studies, but also to have scientists learn how to code, or at least code a little bit better than some of them, like me, are doing right now. We want to have more hackathons, including the one at the upcoming OHDSI Symposium in Bethesda. And we want to provide traineeships. And again, a big shout out to the Chiron initiative that Paul introduced earlier. So please, if you are interested, please do sign up. So that's going to be very important for our OHDSI and our open source software as well. We also need to think about how to make the economics work, because I mean, you can't just depend on people volunteering to contribute. Luckily, a lot of them do, but certainly if you're talking about a package maintainer, that is a long-term commitment. So we need to make sure that we make the economics work. And one way to do that is to have more institutions be able to lead or even provide maintainers for our software. I think the money is there, like the RU Institute and Eden and now Darwin in Europe have an interest in providing resources and maintainers. So we should make sure that we take advantage of that so that we can grow our set of maintainers. We should also be very open to commercial partners, people that want to build a commercial enterprise on top of our tools and hopefully contribute back to the code base. And maybe one of the ways in which we can encourage all of this is by being better at giving credit where credit is due. So for organizations that contribute developer resources, we should make very clear who those organizations are and what they've contributed. And also at the individual level, if we have developers who contribute to a piece of code, we should make very clear what their contributions is so that they can also make everybody else clear that that's what they contributed. So maybe something they could put on their CV or something. So make sure that that's acknowledged. While we're growing, we need to make sure we provide a more robust community structure, which means we need to actually have a code of conduct, which we currently don't. Things like bylaws. But also, as we develop our software stack further, we need to, for example, have more clearly defined interfaces between the various components so that will be better able at decoupling those things to reduce complexity as our community grows. As I said, I think it's very important to keep science at the core of our software. So going back to this idea that our method research actually informs our analytics and our analytics implementation, and sometimes the other way around, our analytics implementations are used in our methods research. It's important to realize that because we are doing research and don't yet fully know how to do the analytics, the software requirements can change, and sometimes actually quite rapidly. And so we need to build our analytics in such a way that we can be flexible in this way. We also need to continue to demand that if we have software, that it actually is backed up by science. That if we make design decisions, that we maybe do an experiment to actually show that that is the right design decision. Furthermore, our software itself actually needs to embrace this idea of scientific analysis. So we have methods research to inform what the analytics should look like, but then the analytics itself should also continuously basically ask the question, are we producing the right evidence? And so our main form, and one of the unique things about our software, is that we emphasize very much diagnostics to actually verify what we're generating is actually reliable. And I would also argue unit tests are part of this scientific thinking, that we validate the evidence that we generate. Another way in which our software could support science is if we have methods research and we have a user that is actually using our analytics, maybe somehow we could forward those lessons through our software. For example, provide decision support to help users design their studies when they're using our tools. So in conclusion, I think open source software is at the core of our OHDSI science. For obvious reasons, we have been incredibly successful already, and I think now is the time to actually deliver on our promise. If I think about the Darwin project that's up and coming, our open source community has grown, but now it also needs to mature a little bit more. And I'm excited about this future, but I certainly can't do this alone. It will require a community, and so I definitely like to express my gratitude to Paul and Adam for initiating this open source community work group, because I think it's coming at a perfect timing to help us mature our open source community. And with that, I'm at the end. Thanks.
Thanks, Martijn. I love working on open source projects because I find that, I find it's one of the best ways to learn. You get to really work with other people who really also enjoy software development. And so it's a great way as a knowledge worker to keep your skills strong. Our closing session, what we did is it was really interesting. It's kind of amazing to think that we take all this different software that's developed independently by scientists and developers using different technologies from R, Java, JavaScript, and then we can put it all together into an environment, in an enterprise IT environment that requires high security, that requires a lot of sustainability and support, and that we can deploy this inside these environments and make sure that we're able to get value out of our technology. And so our closing session was about how do we put the pieces together, and how do we deploy them, and how do we make it easier to make them scalable, easier to be supportable, and also ensuring that security is a mandatory function within our software. And so Lee Evans helped us organize this session with great representatives from Google and from Amazon and from Microsoft. Lee, do you want to talk about the closing session?
Sure, I'll share some of the slides that were presented. So can everyone hear me okay? Can you see the slides?
We can hear you, but no slides yet.
Oh, okay. Let me try that again.
Now we see your screen.
Okay, great. So yeah, as Paul mentioned, we had some great representation from Google Cloud and from Microsoft Azure and AWS. So I'm sure everyone's talked to James at some point, and Vivian and Corey did some great presentations. So the idea was to talk about, okay, so you have the CDM. What's the next steps? You've got your data in the common data model, but you really want to start using these OHDSI tools, these great observational research tools. How do I do that? And this panel really talked about different options that are available. So I've been part of the OHDSI community probably for 6 or 7 years now, and I work a lot supporting the OHDSI Cloud for the Columbia Coordinating Center. And as part of that, I had to sort of figure out how do we host these OHDSI tools. So I came up with a solution a few years ago. It hasn't been as well maintained as I would have liked, and I think there's a goal to improve the support for Docker containers. But the idea is that we can package all the tools, the OHDSI tools, and all the dependencies into some single image that we can then just download and install using the Docker engine. So right now there's a couple of containers available. So we have Atlas and WebAPI in the WebTools Docker container, and we have RStudio and the Hades packages all ready to go in the Method library container. So these are all available right now in Docker Hub, which is publicly a repository that's available publicly. And there's a URL with some pretty detailed information on how to get up and running with the broad-C Docker containers, all the configuration that's necessary. So the two numbers here are the 8700 is how many times the RStudio Hades container has been downloaded and used, and the 6100 is how many times the Atlas Web API containers have been used. So over the years, there's been a lot of usage of these containers, and we'd like to get more. We'd like to get them updated more on a more regular basis as well. So on the right-hand side, I just wanted to show we have an automated pipeline or software workflow process to build the actual OHDSI tools and also containers, different artifacts for that. And I think what's useful here is just to see that there's a lot of different technologies involved. There's Java, there's Python, HTML, a lot of R. So we've done, I think, a pretty good job of automating that. But I think going forward, we'd like to sort of move to a single approach to building software. And that would be, I think, GitHub Actions, which has been kind of promoted by the Hades group. So we're going to try and simplify from these different methods of building software down to, I think, GitHub Actions. Okay, so I talked a little bit about how you can use Docker containers to install the OHDSI tools. But the other options are perhaps you just want to use a cloud environment, so you have access to a cloud account. How do you get started on doing that? So if you have AWS, then there's a couple of options. There's OHDSI on AWS, and then there's a sort of simpler version, which is OHDSI in a box. So James talked about that, and he focused on the enterprise OHDSI on AWS approach. So it's been available since 2018. It's fully automated, so you can get all the OHDSI tools up and running with some simulated data as well. You can attach your own data to that. And they just talked a little bit about usage of that over the years. So 10,000 customer launches. It's been used internationally. And I've used it in support of the OHDSI Symposium since 2018. So when we need to get a tutorial environment up and running, demonstration environment, this has been really great tool that's been produced by James and his team at AWS. So I won't talk too much about the architecture, but just to say that it scales up really well to big data size, and it can be used in production. And then James just talked a little bit about how you could launch that. So it's really simple. Go to a GitHub page, and you can, if you have an AWS account, you can go ahead and run that launch stack, put in a few configuration details, and you're up and running. Okay, so Vivian talked about options on Google Cloud. And there's been a really good collaboration between Google Cloud and Odysseus. So, Greg Klebanov, I'm sure can talk more about that as well. Vivian, talked a little bit about what the option is here. So to get up and running, you can get a sandbox environment up and running through Odysseus. There's Atlas is available on the Google Cloud Marketplace. And also, they've loaded a lot of synthetic patient data into Google Cloud, so that's available as well. And Vivian talked a little bit about usage of that. So over the last month, that synthetic data has, I think, been queried 8.3 terabytes, 27.1 terabytes year to date, and then 115 terabytes all way through all time. So the option for Google Cloud is to use Google BigQuery, and I know Odysseus have done a lot of work to integrate BigQuery and some other big data tools into the OHDSI stack. So I think there's kudos to them for doing all that work and giving people choices. So then Corey from Microsoft talked about Azure's options, and so I guess there's a new proposed OHDSI North Star architecture that's going to be available. I think it's available this week or in the next couple of weeks. And this is similar to the AWS approach. So you can get all the OHDSI tools up and running on Azure. So if you have that Azure account, talk to Corey or talk to us, and we can help you get up and running. I just wanted to call out a couple of things. It's kind of a busy diagram, but we've got some reuse here. So within the Azure solution, we're going to be using Broad-C containers. And I think this solution also allows for multiple database types. So you can scale up, you can use SQL Server, Azure Synapse, and Azure Databricks is going to be an option, I think, too. And there's some options within here to help with ETL, as well as Atlas and Hades. So to finish up, there was some good discussion in the panel around advantages, benefits of cloud. So for hosting OHDSI tools. So we have, obviously the security focus. So cloud providers, one of their key benefits is to focus on providing secure platforms. There's HIPAA compliance if you need that. The benefits of being able to scale up CPUs, storage, databases. You can go to multiple terabytes, as Vivian mentioned, if you need to do that in the cloud. And I think one big benefit for researchers is the ability to deploy very rapidly. So if you have a new idea of what something you need to research, you need to scale up quickly. It can be a challenge for local IT folks to get up and running quickly enough. You can get it up and running with a prototype very quickly on cloud environments. So another topic for discussion was releases and versioning. So, as the Odyssey tools mature, there's going to be sort of less new development and sort of a slower release cycle, which is good because we have more stability and we need that. So I think there's going to be a lot of effort taken around release schedules. It's already started. Having a roadmap, maybe having a couple of releases a year. And then, as Paul said, more focus on making these tools easier to deploy and to upgrade and support within the enterprise environment. So with that, I'll give it back to you, Paul.
Great, thank you. I think one of the major takeaways that I had was that, I mean, for health systems and for most organizations, you're going to have typically a relationship with one of those three big cloud vendors. And no matter which one you have, you can get really fast support with deploying Odyssey. And I highly encourage looking at this. Instead of having to set up your own servers and develop and build your stuff from source, it can be much easier to deploy a somewhat more managed solution within these cloud environments. So I'm pretty excited about that in terms of reducing the complexity of bringing along Atlas and WebAPI along with OMOP. I see too many health systems that have gone and converted their ETL to OMOP, but then don't enjoy Atlas and WebAPI and being able to really analyze their data and get more value out of it. So that was really exciting to see the large support that we're getting for Odyssey from the big cloud vendors. So so that was our day on Friday. We had a lot of fun. We get together. Our Odyssey open source working group gets together every 2 weeks on Wednesday at 11 a.m. Please come and join us if you want to continue in the conversation. Back to you, Craig. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Paul, and thank you, Paul, Adam, Martijn, Lee, James, Vivian, Corey, and then all of our workshop leaders, really for an exceptional session Friday morning. As I mentioned, you can find the Martijn's keynotes, Paul and Adam's State of the Community, and the panel right now on that DevCon page, which is available in the chat. And then hopefully by the end of the week, really 8 great workshops that you can find on the agenda on that DevCon page. All the video from those workshops should be there, hopefully by Friday, certainly early next week at the very latest. But I think I can get them all up this week. So please do check them out. There's a lot that you can learn from that and from everything that was provided during that session. All right, thank you everyone for joining. Remember, next week we will hear from Peter Reinbeck and Danny Prieto Alhambra about the Darwin EU initiative. So please do join us next week. Thank you. Have a great day. Have a great week, and we'll see you next Tuesday.